I had been away for nearly 2 months. The hospital was clean and sterile, but it still smelled like sickness, something I couldn't shake off even when I signed the discharge papers. I'd been counting the days until I could sit in my own chair, drink coffee from my own mug, and look out at the magnolia tree in the front yard like I'd done for 30 years. My daughter Emily was supposed to pick me up, but she'd gotten called into a last-minute meeting at the hospital where she worked. Mark said he could do it, she told me over the phone. He's happy to help. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Mark was my son. Sure, he was a bit impulsive, but he was still family. I figured it would be good for us to spend some time together on the ride home. He showed up late, wearing sunglasses even though it was overcast. "Traffic," he said, tossing my bag into the trunk. The ride was quiet except for his music, some pulsing beat I didn't recognize. But the moment we turned onto my street, I felt something strange. There was a car in the driveway I didn't recognize, a small hatchback with an out-of-state plate. My porch had new potted plants. And the blinds in the living room were different, lighter sheer. When we stepped inside, the air smelled like vanilla cedar candles, the kind sold in glossy jars at chain stores. My house never smelled like that. Then I saw them, shoes by the door I didn't recognize. Not just one pair. 3. A scarf draped over the banister. A jacket on the hook that wasn't mine. "Where's my coat?" I asked without thinking. "Oh, Dad," Mark said, smiling like this was all normal. "Paige reorganized everything. We put your stuff in the guest closet so it's not cluttering the entryway." The guest closet. In my house. I moved into the living room. My recliner, the one Susan gave me for our 10th anniversary, was gone. In its place was a low, modern sofa I'd never seen before. My framed photographs had vanished from the wall, replaced with generic prints of city skylines. "Where's my chair? And the family photos?" I asked, my voice tightening. From the kitchen, Paige appeared, holding a steaming mug. She had that smile again, the one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We just thought it was time for an update," she said lightly. "The old stuff didn't match the new vibe." "The new vibe?" I repeated. Mark stepped in. "Dad, you've been gone for 2 months. We thought we'd surprise you. Make the place more livable." Livable. My home had been livable for 3 decades. I wanted to argue, to demand they put everything back exactly as it was, but my body still ached from recovery. I didn't have the strength for a fight, not yet. So I went upstairs to my bedroom. Except it wasn't my bedroom anymore. The bedspread was different. The walls were painted a soft gray instead of the warm cream Susan had chosen. My dresser was gone. My clothes were shoved into plastic bins in the corner. And on the nightstand sat a framed photo of Mark and Paige, smiling at the beach. "This is our room now," Paige said from the doorway, not even pretending it was a question. "We set you up in the guest room downstairs. It's closer to the bathroom, so it's more convenient for you." Convenient. That word tasted like dust in my mouth. The guest room smelled faintly of paint and lemon cleaner. The bed was neatly made, but it wasn't mine. The walls were bare. The single window looked out at the side of the neighbor's house. It was a room for someone passing through, not someone who belonged. I closed the door and sat on the bed, the weight of what I'd just seen pressing down on me. My body was weak, but my mind was racing. This wasn't about helping me recover. This was about taking over. That night, I lay awake listening to the muffled sound of Mark and Paige talking upstairs. I couldn't make out the words, but their laughter carried. My laughter used to fill this house. The next morning, I called Emily. She came over after her shift, still in her scrubs. The moment she walked in, her face changed. "Where are the photos?" she asked. "In boxes, I guess. Somewhere." She moved through the rooms like a detective at a crime scene. "Dad, they're treating you like a guest in your own house." "I know," I said quietly. "But I'm not ready to fight them yet." Emily crossed her arms. "Then we'll do it smart. Quiet. You get better. I'll start looking into what we can do legally. And just like that, the plan began to form, not out of anger, but out of necessity. Because I realized something as I sat there in that empty guest room: if I didn't take action, soon it wouldn't be my house at all. And maybe that was exactly what they were hoping for. Emily didn't waste time. Within a week, she talked to her friend, a real estate attorney, and started pulling out old paperwork for the house. "You're the sole owner," she reminded me one evening. "Mom's will left everything to you, and your name's on the deed. They have no legal claim unless you give it to them." That was a relief, but it didn't solve the bigger problem. I was still living under the same roof with them. Every day, I woke up to the smell of Paige's coffee brewing in my kitchen, the sound of Mark's heavy steps upstairs in my bedroom. It wasn't just the house they'd taken my peace. The morning after Emily's visit, I sat in the guest room with a notebook and started listing what I'd need to do to take back my home. Not just legally, but physically, emotionally. Quiet moves. Nothing to tip them off too soon. The first step was observation. Mark worked from home, managing investments, which mostly seemed to mean sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop, half watching sports highlights. Paige was in and out all day: yoga classes, coffee runs, lunch meetings, with friends. They'd taken to having dinner in the living room instead of at the table. The plates and glasses would sit there until morning. I'd clean up when they weren't looking. My house, my standards. I started making small changes. Nothing obvious. A lamp in the hallway would go missing from their setup and reappear in the guest room. A family photo, one of me, Susan, and the kids, slipped into a frame where one of their art prints had been. Paige noticed once. "Oh, this picture wasn't here before. Guess it found its way home," I said. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Emily came over twice a week under the excuse of checking in on Dad's recovery. When Mark was home, we talk about harmless things: the weather, old neighbors, the magnolia tree blooming early this year. But when he left for errands, Emily would open her laptop and start filling out forms. We decided to place the house into an irrevocable trust with Emily as co-trustee. That way, even if Mark tried to push me into signing something down the road, he couldn't touch the property without her approval. "It's a safety net," Emily said. "You'll still live here, still own it, but it locks the door from the inside." The paperwork would take a few weeks. In the meantime, we kept things civil on the surface. Mark started dropping hints. "You know, Dad, the market's hot right now," he said one afternoon, leaning against the fridge. "If you sold, you could downsize and have a nice nest egg." "I like my nest where it is," I replied. He shrugged. "Just saying. Big houses can be a lot for someone your age." Someone your age. The words landed like small stones. Not enough to hurt on their own, but enough to notice. Later that week, Paige asked if I'd ever considered transitioning to assisted living. "It can be so much easier," she said sweetly. "And you wouldn't have to worry about upkeep. I've been keeping this place just fine for 30 years, I told her. She gave a little laugh. "Sure, but things change." By the second week, the tension was thick enough to touch. They started locking their bedroom door during the day. They kept their conversations quieter when I walked into the room. I pretended not to notice. At night, I'd sit in the guest room, listening to the faint hum of their TV upstairs, and think about Susan. She'd have known exactly what to say, how to stand her ground without losing her grace. I tried to channel her. The turning point came on a Saturday morning. Emily had come over early, and we were having coffee in the kitchen when Mark walked in, hair messy, phone in hand. "Hey, Dad," he said casually. "Paige and I were talking. If you ever do decide to sell, we'd be happy to take over the process for you. Handle the realtor, the paperwork, all of it." Emily looked at him. "Why would Dad sell his house?" Mark's jaw tightened for a moment before he smiled. "Just thinking ahead. It's a big place for one person." I sipped my coffee. "If I ever sell, you'll be the first to know." Right after Emily. That was the first time he didn't bother hiding his irritation. That night, I found a letter on the kitchen counter addressed to me. It was from a real estate agency, offering a free evaluation for my property. At the bottom, in small print, it said, referred by Mark S. I didn't confront him. I didn't even move the letter. I just took a photo of it and sent it to Emily. Her reply was immediate. Trust paperwork is almost ready. Hang tight. From then on, I made a point of keeping the guest room door locked when I wasn't in it. I kept my important documents in a small safe under the bed, the key on a chain around my neck. One evening I caught Paige in the hallway, her hand on the guest room doorknob. "Oh, I thought this was the linen closet," she said quickly. "It's not," I replied. She didn't make that mistake again. 3 weeks after we started, Emily handed me a folder. "It's done," she said. "The trust is active. The house is untouchable." I felt something in my chest loosen for the first time since I came home. I could breathe again. But we didn't tell them. Not yet. I wanted them to think they still had time, still had control. Because sometimes the sweetest part of taking something back is letting the other person believe they still have it, right up until the moment they don't. By the 4th week, the house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage set where everyone was playing a part. I kept my lines simple, polite, predictable, never giving them a reason to suspect I was preparing for something bigger. But Mark and Paige, they were slipping. It started with whispers. I'd hear them upstairs at night, the faint rhythm of urgent voices through the ceiling. Sometimes Paige's voice would rise sharp enough to carry, "We can't wait forever." I'd keep reading my book, eyes on the page, ears open. The first open crack came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the kitchen making tea when Mark came in, wearing that casual, "I've got a proposal" smile. "So, Dad," he began, leaning against the counter, "Paige and I have been talking about the future. You've got this big house, and we've got plans. It just makes sense for us to take over the property now. You could move somewhere smaller, more comfortable." I set the kettle down. "Comfortable for who?" "For everyone," he said smoothly. "We could maintain the place, and you wouldn't have to worry about anything." "I'm not worried," I said evenly. Mark's smile thinned. "I just don't want you to burn yourself out." "You're very concerned all of a sudden," I replied, my voice low. He didn't answer. He just left the room, the smile gone. That evening, Emily stopped by. We took a walk in the yard under the pretense of getting fresh air. I told her what Mark had said. She shook her head. "They're getting desperate. That means the trust will hit harder when they find out." We paused under the magnolia tree, its blossoms heavy and fragrant. "Don't give them any hint," she warned. "The quieter you are, the louder the ending will be." Paige's tactics were different. She liked to make small, cutting comments that sounded helpful if you didn't listen closely. One morning, she saw me struggling to open a jar of jam. "You know, in assisted living they help with all that," she said with a sympathetic smile. I twisted the lid open and slid it onto the counter. "I think I'm managing fine." She laughed lightly. "For now." I noticed they'd started treating the house as if it was already theirs. New rugs appeared in the hallway. My old desk disappeared from the study, replaced by a sleek glass table. Even the garage was rearranged, my tools shoved into boxes while their bikes and storage bins took the best spots. Emily urged me to document everything. Photos, dates, descriptions. If they tried to pull anything, we'll have a record. So I did. Quietly, without a word. The tension came to a head one Friday evening. Mark and Paige had friends over. They drank wine in the living room, music playing louder than usual. From the guest room, I could hear them laughing, telling stories about their house. One of the guests, a tall man with a booming voice, said, "Man, you lucked out getting this place from your dad." Mark didn't correct him. He just smiled. I sat in the dark, hands clenched, reminding myself, not yet. The next morning, Paige caught me in the kitchen. "About last night," she began. You seemed a little quiet. I hope you're not feeling left out. I wasn't invited, I said plainly. She blinked. Oh, it was just a small thing. You probably wouldn't have enjoyed it. You're probably right, I replied. Her eyes narrowed just slightly before she smiled again and walked out. Emily's updates were the only thing keeping me steady. Paperwork's airtight, she said during one visit. Once we serve the notice, they'll have 30 days to leave. They can try to fight it, but they won't win. I nodded, but a part of me still dreaded the confrontation. Not because I thought they'd win, but because I didn't know what would be left of our family afterward. One night, I woke to the sound of movement outside the guest room. The doorknob turned slowly, then stopped. A pause. Footsteps retreating. In the morning, I found a faint smudge near the handle, fingerprints. I didn't mention it. But that evening I moved the safe from under the bed to the trunk of my car, locking it in the garage. By now, Mark barely bothered with pleasantries. He spoke to me in clipped sentences, his tone controlled but cold. Paige, on the other hand, doubled down on her fake sweetness. It was a performance. Both of them trying to keep the act together while the clock ran out. The moment I knew it was time to end it came on a Sunday afternoon. I'd been sitting on the porch, enjoying the quiet, when I heard Mark on the phone inside. Once we get him out, we can put it on the market fast. The neighborhood's hot right now. We'll clear at least $500,000. I didn't hear the rest. I didn't need to. That evening I called Emily. It's time, I said. She didn't ask what I meant. She just said, I'll be there in the morning. Emily arrived the next morning just after 8, her hair pulled back, a manila folder tucked under her arm. She gave me a look that was both calm and sharp. Are you ready? She asked. I nodded. More than ready. We didn't have to wait long. Mark came down the stairs in a t-shirt and sweatpants, rubbing his eyes. Paige followed, already dressed, her hair perfect, a mug in hand. What's going on? Mark asked, noticing Emily at the table. Emily didn't bother with small talk. She slid the manila folder across the table toward him. This, she said, is a legal notice. Effective today, you and Paige have 30 days to vacate this property. The home is now in an irrevocable trust that you have no legal claim to. For a second, Mark didn't move. He just stared at the folder like it might bite him. Then he laughed, short and humorless. This is a joke, right? It's not, Emily replied evenly. And before you think about challenging it, the paperwork is airtight. Any attempt to damage the property or interfere with the trust will be documented and prosecuted. Paige's face went pale. You can't just kick us out. We live here. Emily tilted her head. You've been guests here. That ends in 30 days. Mark finally opened the folder, flipping through the documents. His hands tightened around the pages. This is ridiculous, he snapped. Dad, you're letting her manipulate you. You've always been easier for her to control. I met his gaze steady. No one's manipulating me. I've been watching you both since I came home. You've treated this house like it was yours, moved me into a guest room, replaced my things. I stayed quiet because I wanted to see how far you'd go. And you went too far. You're blowing this out of proportion, Mark said, his voice rising. Paige stepped forward. We were helping you. This place needed updating, and you clearly couldn't handle it yourself. Helping me? I asked. By talking about selling my house behind my back? By calling realtors? By making me feel like a guest in the home I built with your mother? Paige's mouth opened, then closed. Emily broke the silence. You have until the end of the month. If you need help finding somewhere else to stay, there are plenty of rental listings. But you're leaving. This is not negotiable. Mark's jaw clenched. You think you can just erase us from your life? You erased yourself, I said quietly. The day you decided money and control were more important than family. The next few days were tense. Mark and Paige kept to themselves, slamming doors, speaking in hushed tones. Sometimes I'd catch them looking at me like they were still trying to figure out if there was a way around it. I didn't give them one. Emily stopped by every other day, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just to check in. "They'll either leave quietly or make it messy," she said. "Be ready for both." By the second week, their friends stopped coming over. The laughter and music that used to drift downstairs at night were gone. The house felt quieter, but not peaceful yet, like the silence before a storm. I kept my routine steady. Morning coffee on the porch. Reading in the afternoon. Light work in the yard. Every time I saw them, I was polite but distant. I wanted them to know I wasn't afraid of them anymore. One evening, Paige knocked on the guest room door. I opened it to find her holding a photo frame, one of the old family pictures that had been in the attic. "I found this in a box," she said softly. "Thought you might want it." I took it from her. "Thanks." She lingered for a moment. "I know you think we were trying to take something from you, but we weren't, not really." "Paige," I said, "you don't accidentally move someone into a guest room. You don't accidentally call realtors. You made choices." "So did I." She looked like she wanted to say more, but instead she just nodded and walked away. Mark didn't speak to me directly until the final week. He cornered me in the kitchen, his voice low but sharp. "You're making a mistake. Paige and I could have made this place better. You're letting it rot." "It's not the house that was rotting," I said, meeting his eyes. He stared at me for a long moment, then left without another word. By the time the last day arrived, the air in the house felt heavy, like everyone was holding their breath. Emily came early, just in case there were problems. Mark and Paige carried the last of their boxes to the car in silence. No hugs. No goodbyes. Just the sound of cardboard scraping against the doorframe. When they were gone, I stood in the doorway with Emily, the magnolia tree swaying gently in the breeze. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Better than I've been in a long time." We stepped back inside, the house quiet except for the ticking of the clock. For the first time in months, it felt like mine again. The first night without them was quiet. Too quiet. I walked through the house like I was rediscovering it for the first time. My recliner was still gone, my dresser still missing, my bedroom painted in that cold gray. But without their voices, their footsteps, their presence, every room felt lighter. Emily stayed the night, just to make sure I wasn't alone. We ordered takeout from the little diner I used to go to with Susan, sat at the kitchen table, and talked about nothing important: weather, sports, the neighborhood. For the first time in months, it felt like my house was listening instead of being talked over. The next morning, I started reclaiming the space. First, the guest room. I moved my things out and stacked the boxes in the living room. Then I walked upstairs to my bedroom. The gray paint would have to go, but that could wait. For now, I took down every single piece of Paige's decor, the abstract art prints, the silver-framed photos of them at the beach, the fake plants. By the end of the day, the room was stripped down to the essentials. Empty walls. Bare shelves. A blank canvas ready for me to fill again. Emily came by in the afternoon, wearing old jeans and a t-shirt. "I thought you might need a hand," she said, holding up a paint roller. We worked in companionable silence for hours. The soft cream color Susan had picked years ago slowly covered the gray, and with each stroke, I felt the house breathing again. When we finished, I stood in the doorway and looked at the room. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was mine again. A few days later, I found my recliner in the garage, shoved behind boxes of their things they'd forgotten. Emily and I carried it back inside and set it in its rightful place in the living room. I sat down, leaned back, and for the first time in months, felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. It wasn't just about the furniture. It was about erasing the idea that someone else could dictate how I lived in my own home. I replaced the city skyline prints with my old family photos. The one of Susan laughing in the backyard. The kids sitting on the porch swing when they were little. Me and Emily at her college graduation. Each frame was a reminder: this is my history, my life. The neighbors started stopping by when they saw me in the yard again. Mrs. Kennedy from across the street brought over banana bread. "We didn't see you much when they were here," she said softly, not naming Mark and Paige. "I didn't see myself much either," I replied. One afternoon, about a week after they left, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Mark. It wasn't long, just a single page. He wrote that he felt blindsided, that he and Paige had only been trying to help, that he thought I'd overreacted. He didn't apologize. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer with other papers I didn't need to read twice. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. With the house finally my own again, I started living on my own terms. I planted new flowers under the magnolia tree. I fixed the creaky step on the porch. I started having Emily and her friends over for dinner, filling the rooms with laughter that felt genuine. The silence in the evenings was no longer heavy, it was peaceful. One night, Emily and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. She looked over at me. "Do you regret it? Any of it?" I thought about it for a moment. No. They showed me who they were. All I did was make sure they couldn't take anything more from me. She nodded. "You taught them a lesson, even if they don't realize it yet." "Sometimes," I said, "the lesson isn't for them. It's for me. To remember I don't have to let anyone decide my life for me." As the weeks passed, I realized something else. I wasn't just taking back the house. I was taking back myself. When I was in the hospital, I'd felt fragile, uncertain, dependent. Mark and Paige had used that to try and rewrite my life. But surviving it, and quietly, firmly undoing their plans, had given me back a strength I didn't know I still had. It's been 3 months now. The trust is secure, the house is mine, and my routines are back. I still think about Mark sometimes, but not with anger anymore. Just with a kind of sadness. He chose greed over family. And that's something he'll have to live with. As for me, I'm living just fine. Sometimes, at night, I sit in my recliner with a cup of tea, listening to the creaks and sighs of the house settling. It's an old house, full of memories, some good, some bittersweet. But they're mine. And that, I've learned, is worth protecting. It's funny how quickly a house can heal once the wrong people leave it. Within weeks, the tension that had weighed on every room lifted, and the walls seemed to breathe again. The magnolia tree in the yard bloomed later than usual that year, but when it did, the blossoms were fuller than I'd ever seen them. I took it as a sign, nature's way of saying that even after a harsh season, renewal is possible. Emily and I settled into a comfortable routine. She visited on weekends, and we'd work on small projects together. One Saturday, we cleaned out the attic, sorting through boxes of old photos, letters, and keepsakes Susan had saved. At the bottom of one box, I found a yellowed envelope with my name on it in Susan's handwriting. Inside was a note she'd written years ago. "Robert, no matter what happens, protect this home. It's the heart of our family. If the walls could talk, they'd tell the story of every moment we've loved each other here. Don't let anyone take that away." I sat there for a long time, holding that note, hearing her voice in my head. Later that week, I decided to frame it and hang it in the hallway where I'd see it every day. A reminder of why I'd fought, not just for a building, but for the life it represented. The first time I saw Mark after he left was at the grocery store. He spotted me near the produce section, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. He didn't smile. Neither did I. He gave a small nod, and I returned it. No words. There was nothing left to say. Paige never reached out. I heard from a neighbor that they'd moved into a rental across town. Apparently, the market wasn't as hot as Mark thought, and they were struggling to find something they could afford. I didn't feel joy at that news, but I didn't feel pity either. Actions have consequences. As summer turned into fall, I found myself hosting more. Old friends came by for barbecues. Emily's kids, my grandkids, ran through the yard, their laughter filling the air. The house was alive again, not with the forced energy it had under Mark and Paige, but with something real. One evening, After everyone had gone, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The air was cool, the leaves starting to turn. I thought about how close I'd come to losing this place, not through a legal battle or a financial disaster, but through something more insidious, control dressed up as help. They hadn't barged in with force. They'd crept in, slowly replacing my life with theirs, until I'd barely recognized my own home. But I'd taken it back. Quietly. Completely. Emily joined me on the porch, 2 mugs of tea in hand. You know, she said, you could have kicked them out right away. But you didn't. You let them think they were winning. That's what really got to them. I smiled faintly. Sometimes the best revenge is patience. Let someone walk themselves into a corner before you close the door. She laughed. You and Mom would have made a good team at this. I looked at the magnolia trees swaying in the evening breeze. We were a good team at everything. That night, I went to bed in my own room, my room, the one I'd painted back to the color Susan loved, and lay there in the quiet, listening to the house settle. Every creak felt like a heartbeat. Every sigh felt like a memory settling into place. And for the first time in a long time, I slept deeply, knowing that the home Susan and I had built was safe. Because here's the truth I've learned. Houses can be replaced. Things can be replaced. But the sense of belonging, the knowledge that you are home, that's worth fighting for. And sometimes, the sweetest victories are the ones no one sees coming.